Speaking of 9/11, many of us watched that from afar, and hours of news coverage tugging at every emotion. I remember I was glued to the television as the country was.
Yeah, couldn't get away. But when I recently sat down with Tom Sinas of Sinas Dramis law firm, I learned something very interesting about him actually revolving around that very day. Take a listen.
In 65 years, we've done kind of a little bit of everything. But in the last, I would say 40 years or so, we've really become known for the work and expertise that we have doing personal injury work, which is kind of a phrase I don't really like, but what it really means is representing people who have been the most tragic event of their life.
I truly believe that everybody has a story, and that couldn't hold truer for what came out of a recent interview with Thomas Sinas, who heads up the Grand Rapids location of Sinas Dramis Law.
You know, I had no pressure from my family. My father, who's now my law partner, went out of his way never to pressure me or my brother, who's a lawyer at our firm, never to pressure us to go to law school, to practice law, or to join the firm. He really wanted us to just make that decision, and my mom too. They both wanted us to just make that decision on our own. And here we both are, you know, today, here, and we came here on our own, and we're that much better for it.
And his journey has some eye-raising moments.
So I studied economics and music at Michigan, and then I graduated from there in 2001, and I moved to New York City in July of 2001, actually. As it turns out, it was 6 weeks before September 11th. I didn't work in Lower Manhattan. I lived in Upper Manhattan, sort of a Harlem area, and I worked in White Plains, which is a suburb actually north of Manhattan, so I reverse commuted. So I was at my office when it happened, and then had to make the journey back at the end of that day along the commuter trains that were closed most of the day. Finally that night they let people come back into the city, and I took the journey back into the city, and the journey then across town to my apartment that night, you know. So it's like anybody who lived through that experience, even if you weren't in New York, you sort of remember everything about that day, right? But I can remember everything even more vividly about that day because I remember coming back into the city, and I remember seeing this huge plume of smoke in Lower Manhattan, and I remember laying in my apartment, and you could actually smell, as the wind blew, you could smell the whatever was burning in Lower Manhattan, you know. I think what made more of an impression on me was not actually living through the day, but living through the weeks afterwards, and being in New York. And you know, you see now all these pictures of the signs of the missing. They were everywhere. Every subway tunnel, every park, every city block. And as you walked through town, it was just like one montage of missing people. So when I think back to that day, the thing that makes me the most emotional is walking past all these ad hoc memorials of people looking for their family members.
Tom was not scared to live there. It actually made him more proud.
I mean, you hear people say this, but it really was true when you were there. Like, everybody really banded together to try to make sense of what happened and try to help each other. And I remember, you know, taking time off work and making sandwiches for firefighters, or whatever everybody in New York tried to do. It was this huge city that everybody came together for a common cause. So it made me actually want to stay. Sure. You know, and it's like, if you live in New York, especially if you lived there during that time, you take a piece of that with you, and you'll always have it a part of you.
He stayed in New York City for roughly 2.5 more years, then headed west to Minneapolis for law school.
Went to law school there, and I had a great experience in law school, and I ended up getting a great job at law school. I worked for a woman who was then the president, and I believe she was only the 3rd woman president of the Trial Lawyers Association of the United States, which is a huge group of people. And I met her in law school, and I told her that I wanted to work for her, and I never thought she'd hire me, and she did. And so I got to be at her side right out of law school, and I worked for her for 3 or 4 years. And she gave me a gift that most young lawyers don't get, which is the gift of actually trying cases and working on files, and not just sitting in a room and reviewing documents. She let me learn how to be a trial lawyer. I worked for about 3 years as a white-collar criminal prosecutor at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office in Minneapolis. Hennepin County is the largest county in the state of Minnesota, and it's where Minneapolis and most of the suburbs are. So it's a big city prosecutor's office. I got a special opportunity to work solely on financial crimes, and I was tasked specifically with dealing with the fallout of the financial fraud from the mortgage meltdown in 2008. So I prosecuted a number of complex mortgage fraud cases. Many of those cases involved identity theft. I prosecuted embezzlement cases, some tax cases. And I loved the work because I was dealing with a group of criminal defendants who woke up in the morning and decided that they were going to steal money.
In 2013, Tom and his wife decided to head back to his home state of Michigan. They love raising their 2 kids here.
It's really cool to have seen the office grow from just me alone to 6 people in 3 years. Yeah. You know, and I attribute that really because Grand Rapids is just a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to work, and the community's been very embracing of us. Yeah. And we wouldn't have had the success we've had if it wasn't for the warm reception that we've got from everyone in the community.
And I can tell you, I wasn't expecting that story about 9/11 to come out when he just was kind of going to go past it. I said, well, wait a minute. The journalist in me said, we need backup. We need to talk about that a little bit.
Intriguing story.
Yeah, it really is. Sinas Dramis Law Firm does have 3 different locations, one here in Grand Rapids, one in Lansing, and one in Chicago. For more details, you can go online to sinasdramis.com or give them a call at 866-758-0031.